Welcome back to the second part of this little series about how you can map a heritage trail using a relation type site on OpenStreetMap. In the first part, we had added the plaques and information boards in Graiguenamanagh on the heritage trail to OpenStreetMap and had created the relation. And in this video, we're going to flesh out the information points a bit more on the map with data that we can find on Wikidata and also on Wikimedia Commons, and add the inscriptions of some of the plaques where they haven't been added already. So I've run the same overpass turbot that we ended on in the last video, only I've added a bit of style code there to hopefully make it easier to see where they are. But you don't really have to know how to do that. It's just to show you that I have a couple more locations now. And as I mentioned in the first video, I took photographs of most of the plaques and information devices, and sometimes of the actual objects that you're supposed to look at when you're doing the heritage trail, and that you're going to learn about the history of Graiguenamanagh in its context of the Irish history. And I uploaded all these images to Wikimedia as usual, and they are all in the larger category Graiguenamanagh, but for some of them I created subcategories where I took more than one picture. If there is more than one picture of an object, you can create a category for it. And this is what I did for some of them, like the Cushendale woolen mills, or on the plaque it's called the monastic mills because it goes back to monastic mills around 1200, and the Cushen family took over, I'm not quite sure when, after the Middle Ages anyway. But they still have the mills there, and they're still producing cloth there, like the monks did back in the day from all their sheep's wool. So we have this category here. And I want to create a category with photographs of all the things that are on the heritage trail and of the plaques. And I'm just going to show you how you can do that. So first we have to find one of the images. I'm going to use one of the plaque images. Be good to use the, oh yeah, I forgot to take a picture of the one of the Singleton's Well one, so I can't use that. So I'm just going to use this one here, the assembly rooms. The plaque is here in the river alley. I'm just going to open that in a new tab. And you have to be logged in with your Wikimedia username or Wikipedia or Wikidata. That's all the same account. To create a category, I think you have to be logged in. So you see we have the photograph here, and it is kind of legible already in this resolution, but you could also click on a larger resolution and make it easier to read. And then there's a little description here, which I added while I was uploading that using the Wikimedia app on my phone, mostly on my bus ride back to Kilkenny. And down here you see we have the categories. It's only in the, well, there are a couple of hidden categories, never mind about those, but the official public categories, it's only in the one called Graiguenamanagh. And I want to add it to a new category called Graiguenamanagh Heritage Trail. And you can just add a new category by clicking on the plus here. Let me make that bigger. On the plus here. But I often just modify the category that is already there. It depends a bit on what's there. But I'll just copy this here, because we're going to put the new category into the Graiguenamanagh category. And to just edit this category here, I click on the plus minus, and that makes it editable. And I will just add heritage trail after Graiguenamanagh. And if you look over here, there is an X here, which means this category doesn't exist yet. But that's fine. It's open source and open data. You can create categories if you want. And I just click OK. and that turns the link, it has to refresh the page, but it turns the link brown, or kind of reddish brown, I don't know what you want to call that color, and that means that this page doesn't exist yet, or this category doesn't exist. Also, when I hover over it, it says category Graiguenamanagh Heritage Trail, in brackets, page does not exist. But we can make it exist by just clicking on it, and this brings us to a new page which is called Creating Category Graiguenamanagh Heritage Trail, which is what we want to do. And it has automatically already put this image into that category. So the minimum you have to do is put this category into a new category. And there are presets down here that you can click on, and one of them is category. Click on that, and that adds the template for a category, and you just have to add the name of the category that you want to have this subcategory in after the colon, and that's Graiguenamanagh. And what I also want to do is add another template that is called GeoGroup. For these kinds of templates, you use the wavy brackets, and it's called GeoGroup. And what that does is it creates a map of all the images that are in the category, which I think is neat, and it's useful for a heritage trail. And I don't know if maybe there is a category called Heritage Trails in Ireland. We'll have to see. And before we save that, we're going to click on Show Preview. And you see that added this template here, and this box here, map of all coordinates on OSM and as KML. Of course, it doesn't make a lot of sense because there's only one image in this category so far. And if we scroll down here, we see that, yes, the category Graiguenamanagh exists. The one Heritage Trails in Ireland does not exist, and I don't want to go and create that. So I'm just going to delete that again and show preview again. And scroll down, and it has that in the category Graiguenamanagh. You could also add a description. I could make one up now. Heritage Trail guiding a visitor along the 800 plus year history of Graiguenamanagh, created by the Graiguenamanagh Heritage Society. I think Historical Society. I think it was in 2014, but I'm not entirely sure. And unfortunately, the leaflet also doesn't say that. That would have been interesting to know. And we'll click on Show Preview again, just in case. Yeah, I mean, the wording might not be perfect, but it'll do for now. And we can publish the page. And if I go back into the category Graiguenamanagh and scroll up here, it shows all the subcategories. And it also now shows Graiguenamanagh Heritage Trail. I personally don't like this being sorted in under G, under Graiguenamanagh. I would rather have this categorized or sorted in under H for Heritage Trail. And there is a trick to do that. You go back in here and go into Edit. And where it says, where we had added the category Graiguenamanagh, you add a vertical line and type Heritage Trail. And what this does now is that it will, the bit after the vertical line is what it will display on the wiki. And the bit before that is the link, the code, so to speak. I'll show you the preview again. So here, down here, it would just still show Graiguenamanagh, because that's what the category is called. But the hack there is that when I save this now, don't quite know how to describe that summary. So I'm just going to add, take this is a minor edit and publish changes. And if I refresh the category Graiguenamanagh now, you should see this jump down under H. And that worked. So it's still called Graiguenamanagh Heritage Trail, but it's sorted in under H, because I presume if you're from Graiguenamanagh and you're searching for it, you might search under H for Heritage Trail rather than Graiguenamanagh. And if there are going to be 50 categories at some point and people get tired searching through 5, they can always use the Control F and search for Heritage Trail and find it that way. So we have a category for the Heritage Trail now. We could add that to our relation on OpenStreetMap, and this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go in here again. Where's that gone? Here, where I added the first part because there's not too much going on around there. Go into the editing mode, find my tourist information sign, which is this one here, highlight that, and down here click on the site Graiguenamanagh Heritage Trail to come into the tags for the trail or for the relation. And here we can add Wikimedia Commons, and we can add the category, and we have to include this whole link, including the category. And we'll save that. Added Wikimedia category to Heritage Trail relation. And because this will take a while to show you on Overpass, in the meantime, I can add a couple more of the plaques to that category. This one, and this one, and this one. And when you go into the plus minus to edit the category, you see that it now automatically comes up because it also starts with Graiguenamanagh. So I can just click on that. And you see now, before that we had an X here, signaling that the category didn't exist. But now that it does exist, we have a little tick here, and we can just click OK. And that adds that image to this category. Close that and go on to the next one. And here you see, I'll probably use that one later. This is for something that was relating to Charles Bianconi's coaches in the 19th century. And I've added this image to the category for Charles Bianconi as well. And it's probably not the worst idea to add images to more than one category if you can find a suitable one. This one, Convent of Mercy, there didn't seem to be a category or even a wikidata entry for Convent of Mercy, so I only added it to the Graiguenamanagh one, and now it's in the Heritage Trail category. This one is different. It's not like the other blue plaques that we've seen before, but it is part of the Heritage Trail. Maybe you can read that it was erected in 1998, so a long time before 2014, and it's a little bit blurry because I couldn't get any closer to the building to photograph it. So I had to use the zoom on my camera phone, which is not great. And there's another one that isn't actually a plaque, but it looks like a plaque. I'm not entirely sure about the apostrophe there. I think it should be after the S or no apostrophe at all. But when you're copying that onto OpenStreetMap, you have to copy it the way it is spelled in real life, not the way it should be spelled, unfortunately. You could always use an alternative name and spell it correctly. So those are some of the plaques added, and if I refresh the category now, we should have a couple more. It says somewhere usually 6 in total. I have to add more, of course. But if I clicked on the map of all coordinates now, that we have generated using the GeoGroup template, it'll automatically do it like that. And of course it's also OpenStreetMap based, and you can hover over that and it'll show you the images. The coordinates here are a little bit off. Mine were off for a lot of the pictures as well. I've gone and corrected some of them. So you could even use that URL if the Graiguenamanagh Historical Society had a website, which they don't. They don't even seem to have a Facebook page. But if they had, they could actually use this on their website, I presume, somehow implement this. And if we refresh this Overpass Turbo search, it doesn't change anything in the results. But if I clicked on one of them here and clicked on the link for the heritage trail, on the left hand side you see all the tags that we've added so far to the heritage trail, and it also shows the Wikimedia Commons link. And I could click on that and open the same category again. But it also shows you again what the sites are that we have mapped so far. And since we've taken all these pictures of the plaques, we want to add these pictures to OpenStreetMap as well. So, as I said before, I forgot to take a picture of the first one that I went to at Singleton's Well. So if someone else living in Graiguenamanagh could maybe do that at some point. But I certainly took a picture of the one at the Monastic Mills one. Somebody else had done that before on GeoGraph. And to add the photograph, I click on this here, either this way, or I go in on OpenStreetMap, zoom in on the mill or the plaque, and go in that way. It doesn't really matter. And if I click on the little pencil, it'll open that plaque automatically in the editor. And it has a couple of tags already. I'll change the material to metal because I'm not entirely sure that it is actually steel. And add Wikimedia Commons and find a photograph of that on Wikimedia. I'll use my own. I uploaded an uncropped version and a cropped version, but this one is easier to read, so I'm going to use that one. You can click on the picture and it'll open its own page, and you get the link up here, file : plaque for Monastic Mills. Or if you don't want to open the page, just copy this, but remember that you're going to need the file : before, otherwise it won't work. And go back into OpenStreetMap, and because I didn't copy the file, I have to type it, file : paste, and go to the front again to check that it's all correct. That would be one of them. And then we can search for another one, let's say the one for the drinking fountain, which was up very high, not easy to photograph. And I'll use this link here, find the plaque for the fountain, which is over here. Wikimedia Commons, and paste that link. If you have your own, if your own historical society has a heritage trail and you have your own website or some other way where you can upload the photographs, you can upload them through there, of course, and you can link them, and you would use the key image and then the URL to that image file, not your website. It has to be to the image file. But because on Wikimedia you have all kinds of possibilities of adding data, I prefer that. For example, here, see the plaque says drinking fountain 1899, fresh water drinking fountain. This fountain was the first drinking water supply for the town. The original location was closer to the northwest corner of Dushk Abbey. And if you went into structured data, which is where you add wikidata for the things that you can see on the picture. For example, here I've added commemorative plaque, because that's what it is. You could also add, for example, 1899 calendar year, because that is depicted in the photograph. And yeah, I think that's enough. I wouldn't add stuff like drinking fountain because you can't actually see the drinking fountain, and I also wouldn't add Dushk Abbey because you can't really see the abbey in the picture. And then of course you have to publish the changes. Not all of what we're doing here will have an immediate effect on OpenStreetMap, but it's always good to add as much data as possible through these databases, because that's what they are for, and you never know who's going to come along and use the data for something useful. So we've added that. We can also add the inscription, because it's one of the few where I haven't added the inscription already. And you type in inscription, don't have to type the whole thing. What might be useful is to type it into a notepad first, because you can switch between this image and this easier. You could just have two windows here, of course, but also if you start typing here, I'm just going to start typing 1899, oops, full stop, and then I go into this tab and I want to type freshwater drinking fountain. Of course, it doesn't do now what I wanted to show you, so maybe just go that way. Freshwater drinking fountain, full stop. And read on. This fountain was the first. Before that, maybe they changed that. Before that, I would have highlighted the whole text every time I go back into this tab, and then you might accidentally overwrite what you've already written, which can be quite annoying. I've forgotten the text now. This fountain was the first. This fountain was the first drinking fountain. One of the reasons also why I would prefer doing this on a real computer with the proper keyboard rather than on my phone is that when you're doing this on your phone in OSMAnd or in Everydoor, autocorrect might do funny stuff to the text that you might not notice until it's saved. And somebody else might notice it 5 years later looking at the data on OpenStreetMap. First drinking water supply, not fountain. Drinking water supply for the town. For the town, full stop. The original location. But you see it always goes back to the last one. It doesn't keep the space. Forgotten the text again. The original location. The original location was closer to the northwest corner of Dushk Abbey, full stop. One of the problems you might get with inscriptions, especially gravestones, is that the inscription field here only allows for 255 characters. It will warn you when you've reached 255, and then you will have to continue in creating a new field using inscription _1. I don't like having to do that, but that's what you have to do. You could also, you can see here, there is a field for inscription URL. If I had added the inscription to the Wikimedia file, which I should have done, you could link to that, for example. Or if your Heritage Society had a website and they had a list of all the plaques there with all the inscriptions, you could link to that. But we're talking about small historical societies that, as I said, some of them don't even have a Facebook page. And where would they put all that information? Well, how about OpenStreetMap and Wikimedia? That's where you can do that all for free. You just have to know how. And hopefully I haven't made any typos in this now. Up here, yeah, I was wondering where that was. It will create a field up here, inscription, and you can enlarge it as well if you want to. That might be easier to proofread what you've just typed. That looks like 2 spaces. Was closer to the northwest corner of Dushk Abbey. Material, metal. Thought we had done that. So this is the inscription added. Added Wikimedia link and inscription. I think I have inscriptions for all the other ones already, unfortunately. I mean, it saves me time now, but it didn't leave me much to show you. And of course, you don't have to run this overpass turbo to see the data. You can just activate the data layer, the map data layer on OpenStreetMap, and try to get them like that. There's the plaque, for example, hopefully. Yeah. So we have the direction, so it's almost pointing north, and the inscription, the material, the name, drinking well, and the image. And on OSMAnd, if you went into OSMAnd, for example, and clicked on that plaque on OSMAnd, it would show you the image. You wouldn't have to click and go to Wikimedia directly. So let's say we wanted to add a bit more information to some of the plaques. For example, the Bianconi one. Let's see what we have. So the inscription is already added, which is good. It also has the direction. The direction is the direction it faces, because if you have a plaque on a wall, sometimes it's good to know which way it faces. The material, iron, and name, I usually use the title of the plaque, if you know what I mean. So whatever is the heading on the plaque, I use that as a name. I'm not entirely sure if it is actually iron, the material. So you can also add the subject Wikipedia, but we can add subject wikidata though. The plaque talks about Charles Bianconi and his coaches. He was an Italian immigrant who came to Ireland, lived in Dublin first and was a printer, and then he moved to, I think, Clonmel and started his coach business, and it was the first public transport system, I think, in Ireland. And there are quite a few sites still surviving where he, with inns and stuff like that, where he changed horses. Clonmel has a plaque up for him as well, and other places, and there are place names after him because, you know, he made a big impact on public transport in Ireland. And he has a Wikipedia page, which is Charles Bianconi, but of course he also has a wikidata. Well, I say of course, a lot of things won't have a wikidata entry, but he does. So if I go to wikidata.org and type in Charles Bianconi, there are 2, but it's the founder of public transportation in Ireland. And this is what he looked like. And he has articles in, I'm not sure what that language is, English, Irish, and Dutch. Strangely not in Italian. And up here we have the Wikidata identifier. It always starts with a Q, and there's a lot of information about him, his gender and his given name, which was, of course, at birth was Carlo, because he was Italian, and then he changed it to Charles when he was living in Ireland, and his birthday and his birthplace and all that kind of information. And it's all packed up in this neat little number here, and we can add that to the plaque. And because the plaque is about him, he's the subject of the plaque, so we have to use subject Wikidata as the key rather than Wikidata, because we would only use Wikidata for the plaque if the plaque had its own Wikidata entry, which it doesn't have. So we go into editing mode, and it should still be highlighted. And we just add subject Wikidata and paste that number. And that's all we have to do for now. Added wiki subject. The source is obviously Wikidata. And this also works for buildings. Let's say, for example, the widows' cottages. It might not always work because someone has to create the Wikidata entry for that building or for that person, probably because it is local history and they don't often have a wide effect on the whole of the country. They're not relevant for the whole country, so there's not a great chance that somebody else has already created it. So you might have to do it yourself. But I created a Wikidata entry for the widows' cottages because they are also on the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage. Each one of them, all four, have a number on the NIAH. And if we look that up on Wikidata, widows' cottages, there they are. And I also added the alternative spellings there. And I described it as a row of 4 cottages purpose-built for widows in Graiguenamanagh. And some little information, and I've added the plaque. You can do that on Wikidata. You can add an image of the object, but you can also add a plaque image, which I have done. I thought I had photographed these buildings an awful lot of times, and I thought somebody else had already done it, and I would find them on Wikimedia, and then I get home and discover that nobody has ever photographed them, and nobody has uploaded them to Wikimedia, which is a pain in the something. So next time I'm in Graiguenamanagh, I will have to do that. Maybe somebody else in Graiguenamanagh can do it instead and upload them. And down here we have the 4 numbers for the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage. Wikidata doesn't like that there are 4 identifiers for the same thing, but that's just, I'm not going to have Widow's Cottage 1, Widow's Cottage 2, 3 and 4 because they're not even house numbers on them. So I don't know which one is 1 and which one is 4. So we will have to work with this. So I'm just copying this identifier for the Widow's Cottages and go back into OpenStreetMap. Well, no, go in here and click on the little pencil here, which will open the plaque in the editor, or the tourist information, because it's not really a plaque. And here I have just added material metal, which is a bit less precise than iron or whatever. But anyway, I can add the almost made that mistake, subject Wikidata here and paste that, because remember, the plaque is about the widows' cottages. They are not the widows' cottages, so we have to use subject Wikidata. But if I highlighted these 4 houses here, now these are the actual buildings that are described in this Wikidata entry. So I can add the Wikidata identifier here, same number for all 4 of them. So this is how that works, the difference between subject wikidata and wikidata, and added subject wikidata, and the source is wikidata. Sometimes if there is a category, a Wikimedia category already for that building or that person or whatever, that subject, you will find that here or down here somewhere under the Statement Commons category. But because I have no photographs of the buildings, I couldn't create a category, and I could also not link it on Wikidata. So this is the next step you can do to flesh out the entries for the plaques and information panels or whatever on OpenStreetMap, and how you can add Wikimedia links and categories for that heritage trail. And I will continue doing that, and in the next video then we will add the actual objects through the heritage trail relation. And that should be sufficient then to have this very, very well mapped. Thank you very much for watching so far, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Slán go fóill!